weekend that they realized that she was gone. The FBI should have immediately jumped in and taken over?
I think once this moved from a search posture to a possible kidnapping, the FBI, they're the premier agency in the world to deal with kidnappings. And that's something that our medium-sized law enforcement agency probably just doesn't have the experience to handle. We have 96 detectives, and they're very hardworking detectives, and they've been putting in very long hours each week since she's been missing.
Breaking tonight, Nancy Guthrie is dead. Across Pima County, this is no longer just a story of mourning. It is a story raising serious questions. The issue is no longer who took her. The real question now is who failed her. How does an 84-year-old woman disappear from her own bedroom, leaving behind blood at the scene, a security camera ripped from the wall, and a pacemaker signal that suddenly stops at exactly 2:28 a.m.? And now, 26 days later, there is still no arrest and no clear answers. Tonight, a community is grieving, but it is also demanding the truth.
It's good that you have two agencies working together. It's a joint investigation. The FBI brings a lot to the investigation because they have access to so many tools that perhaps Pima County doesn't have. They also bring a lot of experience. I'm not saying Pima County doesn't have a lot of experience, but as we know, Pima County is a pretty nice, affluent community. And usually when you have very nice, affluent communities, there's really not that much volume of work, right? I'm not saying they're good detectives, but you become a better investigator by the volume of work, right? So when I was a detective in the squad, you're catching like 300, maybe 400 cases a year. That's a lot. And if you're investigating all that, that's a lot of experience. So, you're not born a very better investigator. It's just the work experience. So it's good. It's good that it's collaboration between the FBI.
No suspect. And now concerns about the evidence. But it gets worse. Sources inside Pima County say Sheriff Chris Nanos refused to fully hand the case over to federal agents, the same federal task force that specializes in kidnappings. Why? According to former insiders, Nanos has a personal grudge against the FBI. That claim alone is raising serious questions. And there's more. The man leading this investigation reportedly won his badge by just 481 votes, 4,180 to 4,101. In a case this serious, those margins suddenly matter.
This case of blocking evidence from the FBI, that's just so far from the truth.
We asked him why not send the DNA samples to the FBI's lab.
There's gloves found. So FBI says, okay, so should we send them to the FBI lab? I said, no, let's send it all to our lab. Let's just keep it all in one place. Our lab does good work. Their lab does good work. We talked to the FBI. They said, yep, makes sense. Thanks, Sheriff. And we move on to the next problem.
So you're basically saying this is maybe one person that had a problem with it, but you feel like...
You got 400 officers out there working together. They're not always going to see eye to eye.
Are you sharing the results
Everything.
with FBI?
Absolutely.
Now the county is asking a chilling question. Was this a kidnapping, or did it become a political ego war with a body attached? Stay with me, because what we uncovered next forces a closer look at everything surrounding this case. The deeper you dig into Pima County, the more troubling the picture becomes. Chris Nanos did not simply walk into this crisis. He built the department now handling it. 4 years ago, he narrowly survived one of the tightest elections in county history, holding on to his position by the slimmest of margins.
I was a reporter here for many years before going to New York, and I just want to make sure that the public understands that this is a mom that's missing and is of the utmost importance, which is why many of my colleagues in law enforcement here had some concerns with the way the sheriff was managing this, and especially his communication, or very poor communication, to the public, making statements that were, well, quite frankly, just awful and incorrect, and taking actions that were incorrect as well. So a number of us decided we needed to say something about it, because we did not want it to reflect on our community and the Sheriff's Department, which has been an extraordinary law enforcement agency that I worked with for 3 decades and had a national reputation.
481 votes. That is not a landslide. That is not a mandate. That is a political coin toss with a badge attached. And critics say that since that razor-thin win, the department has been run more like a war room than a sheriff's office. 3 veteran homicide detectives were reassigned. Officially, it was called restructuring. Unofficially, those detectives had supported Heather Lappin, the challenger who nearly took his job. Coincidence? Perhaps. But these were not rookies. They were the investigators who solved the county's toughest cold cases, the ones who understood forensic sequencing and knew how to build a case methodically, piece by piece, instead of building narratives at press conferences. And when Nancy Guthrie disappeared, those detectives were no longer in place. Then there is the air unit.
We haven't narrowed it down to anything other than we have certain pieces of evidence that we're looking at. Chase leads until you either make it or...
1 week before the kidnapping, a highly trained tactical pilot was transferred out of the department. This was not an ordinary reassignment. The county had reportedly invested years and significant funding into his training. Advanced thermal imaging, night search operations, desert terrain mapping. All of it gone and reassigned, according to internal whispers, over minor conduct disagreements. So when Nancy Guthrie disappeared into the freezing desert darkness, Pima County did not have its most experienced aerial search operator in the sky. 3 hours passed before a fully equipped aircraft was deployed. 3 hours in a kidnapping. 3 hours in which heat signatures fade, tracks disappear, and critical windows begin to close. But this is where the pressure intensifies. When federal agents offered to escalate their involvement, not merely assist, but take a larger operational role, Sheriff Chris Nanos reportedly kept the investigation centralized. Control remained local. Evidence routing remained local. Decision-making remained tightly contained. Multiple insiders describe what they call a 3-man circle: Sheriff Chris Nanos, his chief deputy, and his operations captain. And that, they say, was it.
With us once again in Tucson, Arizona. Kelly, what more are we learning about that latest news about the DNA found on a glove a couple of miles from Nancy's house?
Well, the snapshot we are getting from investigators is that there's a lot of evidence that they've been dealing with, and a glove and other gloves have been talked about a lot publicly, and they have taken testing of those. They have established DNA profile, and then they've compared it against that database that you referred to, which includes persons all across the country who've been arrested or charged or convicted with a crime. There are differing laws state by state about when someone who's taken into custody must provide their DNA. But it is a vast database, and certainly if there were a criminal history, that would be a good way to identify a potential depositor of that DNA. Then, is it in some way linked to the Guthrie case? That's another big question. So work is being done. There are hundreds of investigators who are on this case working on a stream of different types of approaches. We know, for example, that they have been canvassing gun stores in the area. Why? Because the suspect seen on that doorbell video had a weapon, had a holster that had some interesting identifying markers that authorities are trying to get a better read on. Where was it purchased? What could they learn about?
No broad task force, no outside command authority, just 3 men steering the largest missing person investigation Pima County has ever faced. Then came the lab decision. Instead of sending critical biological evidence through the federal forensic pipeline, known for rapid DNA profiling and national database integration, the material was sent to a private, out-of-state laboratory. Sheriff Chris Nanos said it made operational sense. Critics argued it slowed momentum. Federal sources, speaking anonymously, reportedly questioned the move. And while that evidence was being processed, Sheriff Nanos went public. He discussed DNA challenges, investigative timelines, and even technological limitations. In most high-level investigations, that kind of detail is guarded closely. Information is leverage. The less a potential suspect knows, the better. But in Pima County, updates were frequent, and some say revealing. Meanwhile, Nancy Guthrie's family waited. Then came the reward debate. The family reportedly wanted to offer money immediately. They were advised to hold off, citing concerns about false tips and investigative noise. But after nearly a month without a breakthrough, the reward was announced. Within 24 hours, tip lines surged.
What gives me
that
hope
raised
is
another
the sheriff
question.
said it's a mixed
If public
sample.
incentive generated
If that
movement,
DNA is
why
mixed
delay
with
it?
Nancy's DNA,
Look at the sequence.
then we know
Detectives
that is the person
reassigned.
that took
A
her.
tactical pilot transferred. Federal involvement limited. Evidence routed elsewhere. Sensitive details disclosed. Reward delayed. Each decision on its own may have an explanation. Together, they form a pattern. And in politics, patterns matter. Remember the margin, 481 votes. That is what placed Chris Nanos in command the night Nancy Guthrie vanished. Now the focus shifts. This is no longer just about where Nancy Guthrie is. It is about whether the department meant to protect her was already strained before she ever needed protection. Then the tone changed. Inside the command center, phones were reportedly redirected, emails archived. When federal agents offered deeper involvement, they were publicly told to step aside. According to two anonymous insiders, Sheriff Nanos allegedly said, "This is our county. We handle our own." The question became, handle it how? Within 48 hours of Nancy Guthrie's death being classified as under investigation, the sheriff's office issued a statement suggesting no immediate foul play was suspected. That raised eyebrows. There were sealed documents, missing digital logs, and reports that Guthrie had expressed concern about powerful individuals days before her death. An internal memo, which cannot be independently verified, allegedly suggested federal analysts found inconsistencies in the forensic timeline. Time of death estimates did not align with nearby surveillance data. Traffic camera footage was reportedly corrupted. When the FBI liaison requested formal access to evidence storage, the request was said to be delayed, then rerouted for review. History added another layer. 3 years earlier, during a joint narcotics operation, Sheriff Nanos reportedly clashed with federal authorities over credit and control. Insiders described that dispute as personal. So, when federal agents returned offering assistance in a high-profile death, some asked, was this about jurisdiction or pride? Public reaction intensified. Local radio questioned the timeline. Online forums analyzed every press conference. A former deputy, speaking anonymously, reportedly said, "If the feds come in, everything gets audited. Every log, every call, every decision." Then came another development. Sources close to Heather Lappin, Nancy Guthrie's legal advisor, suggested Guthrie had been compiling information related to alleged financial irregularities within county leadership. That allegation remains unproven. But if even partially accurate, it shifts the conversation toward motive. Soon after the funeral, an internal complaint was reportedly filed against Sheriff Nanos by someone within his own department. The allegation? Procedural interference and selective evidence prioritization. Around the same time, investigative journalist Aaron Cross claimed he received an anonymous warning to stop digging into the case. He continued reporting and later highlighted unusual emergency fund withdrawals labeled as security enhancements. Public trust began to erode. County council members grew cautious. Requests for independent autopsy review entered administrative consideration. A former county official publicly called for a state-level probe, warning that when transparency becomes optional, democracy becomes fragile. Most concerning were claims from a digital forensic analyst who alleged that metadata on key evidence files reflected access times inconsistent with official reports. If accurate, that would raise serious chain of custody concerns. Sheriff Nanos has dismissed the controversy as online sensationalism and irresponsible speculation. Still, observers noted his tone during recent briefings: shorter answers, sharper responses, a brief pause when asked about personal conflicts with federal agencies. Now, Pima County waits for audits, for possible subpoenas, for clarity. This case is no longer only about how Nancy Guthrie died. It is about who controls the narrative surrounding her death. Nancy Guthrie is gone. Sheriff Chris Nanos is under scrutiny. The county is divided. The question lingering in the air is not only what happened, but who benefits from how it happened. And as the silence grows louder, so do the demands for answers.